G'day guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm pretty stoked. I got me some Dish and some beadlocks, and I'm extremely excited to have them on the ute, and they make a huge difference to how it looks. It's something I've wanted for a long time. I ended up going with some Boyd Connington Bristols, and yeah, they're a good value forged wheel. And I got them through a bloke named Shane from American Wheel Warehouse down here on the north side of Brisbane. Obviously I'll put a link up there if you want any wheels like this. Hit him up. He's a decent bloke to deal with, quite helpful. So to put a deep dish wheel like this on the back of your tonner or anything with a diff, 90% of the time you're gonna have to narrow the diff. So in underneath the diff, the overall width has to be narrowed to allow for the extra dish inside the wheel. So this episode I'll take you through all that, what I go through to make these wheels fit. Now I'll take you over the wheels. They're like I said, Boyd Connington Bristol. The backs I went 15x9, which is the same as my steel wheels. They were 15x9, but these are 5 1/4 back space, whereas my steel wheels were 7 3/4 back space. So obviously the mounting plate was a lot further out. And realistically, a bit of dish, huge difference to the way a vehicle looks. At the end of the video, we'll actually have a good look at the tonner on the ground, and you'll see it looks really good. It looks real good. For the front, obviously we're still stuck with the 17s, but these are a 17 by 4.5 with a 165/70 17 Nankang tyre. The weight difference, like I had 17x6s on the front with the steel wheels. Now with these forged wheels are so light, so I dare say I'll get a little bit of performance gain as well when it comes to drag racing. Less rolling weight, so we should get a little bit of a performance as well as looks. They are a little skinny. They're little skinny fronts, and this model tonner does not have ABS, so that does concern me a little bit, but you know, I'll just have to take it easy. So straight up, let's get into the video. I'll take steel wheels off and I'll show you how I go about getting the diff shortened. All right, up on the hoist. One last look at these old wheels. Custom made, 15v9s. Yeah, time to get them off. The old tonner sits that low that you got to take the rear lead spring shackles out to drop the diff down to get the tyres out of those tubs. Just an interesting fact. You want your car that low with big tubs, it can be a pain. Now with the shackles off and lift it up, and yeah, you can see, get that wheel off easily. Also note I put some marks on the tyres for how low it is. I don't know if those marks will stay there, but that's just so I can line up the new wheels in the tubs when I get these tyres fitted to the new wheels. All right, with the wheels off, now we've got to get an overall measurement of the width of the diff. Now I've got no helpers here with me at the moment, I've got to do it myself, so I've just clamped on a bit of RHS and set up a bit of a holder for the tape so I can measure the distance between the mounting faces of the wheels. Now to do it like this, obviously the ute has to be somewhat level. It's sitting pretty level. I checked with the tape, and yeah, metal RHS either side. Put the tape in, get a measurement. So stock M86 1 tonner diff is 1685 millimeters wide. So we'll take note of that, and now we can move on to taking the actual diff out. All right, it's time to get this diff out. We've got the overall measurement. Now we have to get everything out of the way so we can put the new wheels and tyres up in the guards and get a measurement between the wheels. I've gone through and undone brake lines, top of the calipers. I've taken the caliper bolts out of the back, the 19mm caliper bolts, sway bar, 14mm bolts on the housing, and then 14mm bolts out here. I'll get the sway bar out of the way. My brake fittings into the caliper fittings up here. a little bit questionable, so I'm not going to try and undo them. I was going to take the brake calipers and the line all out as one, each their own. And then once those brakes are out of the way, brake line's out of the way, the diff oil's out of it, we can start looking at taking the axles out. All those brake lines and calipers and sway bar out of the way, nice and clean. Now get your rubber mallet out and give the rotor a bit of a smack and you can get it off. It's pretty easy to get off. Yeah. Then you'll see on the end of the axle here, you can see through the hole, you'll see that bolt in there. That's your axle retaining plate bolt, and there's 4 of them. Yeah, it's hard to do it with no hands, but 4 of them in a square shape. Just rotate the axle around and undo them. Then after you get those bolts out, they are 13mm too, by the way. Then you want to put your rotor on backwards like this, and see there's a bit of slack in it. You use the rotor like a slide hammer. You pull back on this and it will pull the axle out. Yeah, I'm going to get both axles out and then we'll have a look. Both axles out. These are a 30 spline for the M86. They're actually pretty beefy. Yeah, they're not the same length. Left side shorter. So obviously they have to be replaced and made shorter when we make the housing shorter. Next step is to get the handbrake assembly off. There's actually no bolts holding that in. That'll just all pop off. Just gotta undo the handbrake from the hanger and undo the handbrake from the cable up the front there. And then we can get both those handbrake plates off. And the next step will be undo all the U-bolt and the shock bolt on both sides so we can actually get the housing out. All right, shock bolts are out. I think they are 22s. Shackles are out, we're 18mm. And drop the back of the leaf hanger so I can roll that diff straight out. All right, diff housing's out. Now I just tapped on the caliper brackets and pulled the backing plates and handbrake assemblies off. Now I can take this over to Millsy Fab and he's gonna prepare to shorten the diff. And this is the section that'll be shortened. He'll actually grind this end cap off, which in this diff design is a sleeve design. It actually slides over the diff tube. So he'll grind this weld out, take the end cap off. Obviously I'll send him a measurement later for where he needs to cut the tube down. He'll square it all up and weld it back on. Now that diff is all out of the way, I can set up the new wheels and tyres in the guards, set up with even clearance either side of the tub, exactly where you want them. That way we can measure for a new width, set up both sides, nice and even. Before I took these wheels off, these tyres off the old wheels, I actually marked with white dotted lines the ride height. So that way I can even set it up exactly the right ride height inside the tubs for clearance. And then it's just a matter of measuring between the wheels from the brake rotor or the wheel hub where the brake rotor bolts on, sort of thing, there to there, and get a width. And I got 1525. So that ends up being 160mm narrower than the old wheels. So that means it'll be 80mm off each side of the diff and then 80mm off the axles. Now the diff has already gone to Millsy Fab for shortening, and the axles have already been sent to G&D Differential down in Victoria, and they're gonna shorten, re-spline and reheat treat, which is pretty convenient. So yeah, it's a bit of a waiting game now until all that comes back, and then we'll put it all back together. All right, shout out to Millsy Fab for getting this back to me super quick. If you need your diff shortened, make sure you hit him up on Instagram or Facebook. What he did was he ended up cutting the end off, marking a heap of reference points, cutting it down 80mm, and then he has to heat the end up to slide it back on. And another thing we also did, which we'll look at more, is we actually clocked the ends 14mm back to bring the caliper closer to the spring. But what I'll do is I'll put this back in, put it back in the tonner and get it all bolted down, and then I'll discuss that a bit more. Now I've gone ahead and reinstalled the diff on the springs, done the U-bolts, bolted the shocks back up. But what I've done is I've left the rear shackles out now and got the axle stands under the diff and let the weight of the ute back down so I can imitate maximum travel of the suspension. And I knew this when I shortened the diff, and that's why I got Millsy from Millsy Fab to rotate the end cap on the end on the diff to rotate the brakes down, because I knew that the brakes were going to get into the chassis. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to notch the chassis to clear the brakes. Now I'll get in there and get a closer look. Now you can see that handbrake backing plate probably still has 5 to 10mm to come in, and I'm already hitting the brake there on the chassis. So this is maximum compression of the suspension, and you can see that that top corner there of the brake caliper is going to make contact, and the hose also is going to make contact. So I have to do something with the hose. I think just swapping that hose from side to side will make the bend go the other way, so that'll get me off the chassis. And then I'm just going to do a little nick in the little cutout in the chassis to clear for that brake. So I'll go ahead and mark that up, cut it out, and we'll have another look at what's required after I cut it all out and clearance it all. This is where we ended up to clearance those brakes. More than enough room. Only went half the depth and in under half. But not only that, this tonner has been designed to carry a ton of weight, which it doesn't do anymore. It's got triangulated bracing here with 75 by 75 box section, and the notch is between that triangulation. So, you know, I was thinking about welding plate in there, but I don't think I'm going to worry about it, because ideally in the future I really want to remove all this, make it lighter, but then also put a fuel cell in here. And I also want to notch the chassis a little bit so I can go a little bit lower, because at the moment I've only got probably 25mm of play before the diff hits the chassis at ride height. So yeah, future mods to the chassis to look out for, but for Rocky Nats and for the time being, I was going to leave it like that. I'm more than confident it's going to be strong enough, and we'll be able to get the brakes on there. This side's the same. Yeah, I've obviously splashed some paint around there so it doesn't rust, and that'll be just a nice little void for the brake to move up into. So yeah, now I can, I'm actually going to dummy it all back up so I can triple check that the brakes are going to clear. I've played around with that factory banjo, and no matter how I orientate it, it's going to make contact with the chassis, so we're going to have to come up with a new solution. Have to remove these old bearing races out of the end of this diff, and they're tight. So I'll pull out the MIG welder and just run a bead around the inside of the race, and then as it cools down, it'll contract and make the bearing race smaller, and it should just tap straight out, or just slide hammer straight out. I just use a simple slide hammer with internal jaws to get it out. But yeah, bearing race is out, then we can slide the new axles in very soon. There's that bit of a bead. Bearing race comes straight out. I've got the backing plates on. Handbrake assembly black backing plates, ready for new axles, which have arrived. G&J differential services, re-splined, 60mm shorter either side, new bearings. We also went to 1/2-inch wheel studs, new backing plates, new seals. Bloody awesome. They take the standard axle, shorten it, re-spline it, and then reheat treat it, which is, there's not very many people that I could find in Australia that do that. So yeah, good stuff. Now I can slide the axles in. Axles installed all nice, backing plates tightened up, Now we're ready for some brake rotors, but the 1/2 inch wheel stud's going to stop us from sliding them straight on. So just slide them underneath the drill press. We ended up having to go 14 mil, drill the holes out 14 mil, no big deal. And then yeah, they fit up beautiful. So exactly the same amount of play as it would have with a stock stud. So it's just a little bit oversized. The last thing you want to do is be pushing this rotor on and taking out all these threads, so you just need it a tiny bit oversized, but yeah, that's perfect. Getting very close. With those rotors on, a couple of wheel nuts to hold it in place for the time being, I can look to install the rear calipers now. Now before I installed them, I'll just give them a clean up. And I thought, oh, I'll do the front ones as well. Just hit them all with the wire wheel, bit of wax and grease remover, and then just hit it with some aluminium coloured paint just to tidy them up a bit. I've got all new pads for them too. And then I've also got new rotors for the front. I thought, oh, going up to Rocky Nat's going to be racing, going to have to pull this car up, so I want to make sure I've got fresh brakes. So as soon as I've got everything off and I've got to bleed the brakes, perfect time to take the calipers off and just hit it all at once. So now I'll grab the rears, put the new pads in them and get them installed. With those calipers installed, I've gone ahead and installed the factory banjo for the brake line and the brake fluid. And as you can see, I've got an issue there. It's definitely in the way of the chassis. Like, I know my notch is there, but I don't want to have to notch any higher than that, and that line's definitely in the way. So I'm gonna have to come up with a solution to move that. This is a solution I come up with. Got myself some 3/16 steel hard line and some fittings. And instead of the soft line going over the top, then turning into a hard line, wrapping around the front, now we're just going directly from the back, down, around and over into the wire piece. So I'll go into more detail of the parts and how I made these lines. All right, we'll start with the caliper end. Now we've got the standard banjo bolt. We replaced that with a M10 by 1.0 flat washer seal to -3 union. And then we put the copper washer on there, just like the banjo would have, and that seals into the caliper. From there, we flare a piece of this 3/16 steel brake line from Aeroflow. Just comes straight. We flare the end of that. We put a tube sleeve, which is from Aeroflow, and the flare nut, also from Aeroflow. Now let me just go in and I'll show you how to make one of these flares. Here's the tube cutter. Pretty cheap piece. Cut the tube, put it in, wind it up, and then just slowly keep winding it as you rotate it. Gives you a nice clean cut. On the back, you got this little pointy tool. Put it in there and just clean up any burrs. That's perfectly cut, ready for a flare. /3 flare. You got a nice clean cut. Grab your flare tool. This is a ProFlow unit. I've had it for quite a few years. It goes well. Has all the different die sizes on the inside for all your different hardline sizes for flaring. Now you can get this hard line in aluminium as well, same tool, and then you can run fuel line, all sorts of stuff. It's a good tool to have in your box. So I've got it set to 3/16 because that's the line we've got. Now there's a little arm in here that swings in and out. That has to be over the hole so that when you put your line in, it stops it going in too deep. Once it's on there, you can bring the top down and tighten it down. That sets your depth. Now it's nice and tight. You can see it in there. Now this cone-shaped die, so to speak, you just wind that in nice and slow until it bottoms out. Back it out. And there's your perfect flare. 37-degree flare, that is, it's AN flare. Now from there, your tube sleeve goes on. You can see the taper that matches the flare, slides on behind it. Sits in there nicely. Then your flare nut behind that. Then from there, your dash 3 straight on. Perfect little join. Now for the flare on the other end into the T-junction onto the diff, and a lot of these fittings on the 1-tonner or on any VY are these bubble flare or single flare. This is a factory line. So you can see this is what we're trying to achieve, this singular flare, and it seats inside the other side of the fitting. Now, the new parts I got is just a new nut. It's just a 3/16 line, stainless steel flare nut, exactly the same as the standard one. This is the flare tool. It's just a clamp and another cone-shaped die that pulls on it. So we've got our piece of cut hard line there, and I've got it jammed in the 3/16 hole, obviously 3/16 line, and you can see these have a taper around this side. This side's flat, so you've got to make sure you tape side out. And it is set to this little flare piece that goes in the end. You'll see in a sec. And this thing here, you have to have it the same as that first step in depth. Now you can see I've got a little bit of grease on there because I think it needs lubrication. So I've set that perfect depth, clamped it in. Now this hard line is hard to flare on this steel hard line. So I put this in front of the heat gun until it is red hot to try and make it a little bit softer for this flare. So I'll heat that up now and then we'll perform the flare. All right, this is red hot. Got a welding glove on just so I can hold it. Now, I've greased up this flaring piece and it locates inside the tube. Then this goes over. And there's a little hole in the end of that flaring piece. And that's that hot, it's burning my hands through the glove. I'm just going to make sure it's in the center. Nicely in the center. You just gently, I like to flare and then let the pressure off, flare and let the pressure off until it bottoms out. All right, then you let it off. Now let that cool down and I'll show you the finished product. And there it is, cooled down. Just gives it a little flared end. And then obviously your flare nut goes on. It pushes up hard against the back. And you can see it imitates the factory one beautifully. And this is the bit that goes into the T-junction there on top of the diff. Now we've cut, we've flared. Now I'll just quickly show you a basic bend. Now this is a 3/8 bending tool. I don't even have one to suit 3/16, but it still works just the same. You can get ones to suit 3/16. You can put it in, hold it, and then swing it round. And that's how I'm getting my 180. I don't know if I bumped the camera then, but that gives you a nice 180. Obviously you can tweak it around with your hands a little bit. If you're real gentle with it, you can start doing all sorts of bends. You just want to be gentle. Sweeping, if you go too hard, it's not too bad, but it does start to kink a little bit. But yeah, very easily worked. So now I can go ahead and do that other line on the other side. One thing I will remind you too is, before you bend or flare, make sure you slide your nuts and your tube sleeves on. Otherwise you're gonna have to cut the end off and flare again. That left-hand side brake cable's now done. It come up quite well. After you get the knack of it, it starts to go all right. It's all pretty symmetrical, which is exactly what I like. Looks professional, not bad. I also assembled the handbrake. Now this side here, well both sides, because we rotated those bearing ends and the braking backing plate, the handbrake cable goes up more than it used to. So this used to be on here, and this is where that would have been located. So now we're up a bit higher, and I've zip tied it up here. Still nice and level. I've functioned through the handbrake, it works well. I've zip tied this here, just where it rubs, so it doesn't rub. So yeah, that should do as well. So now we're ready to bleed the brakes. What I did on the front as well, just while I had the fronts off and I had the brakes all painted, I got in behind here and give it all clean up and painted the body with a bit of paint, and then just give these plastics a clean up and give them a bit of a spray out with some tire shine to try and bring some black back into it. Because of those new wheels, you can see straight through them, and you don't want to look through them into brown dirt. So I haven't had to paint the struts, they're all good. Control arms are clean enough. But yeah, just up in there, cleaned it up, looks good. Now I can bleed all the brakes and start putting the wheels on. Yeah, don't forget to fill your diff up with oil as well. I use the Penrite Pro Gear 8040. Just throw the pump bottle lid straight in. It's about 1.6 litres. Alright, with those wheels on, I thought I'd just give you a look at the clearances we're working with here. Now this is the outside of the wheel to the guard. Probably nearly 10 mil. On the front there, the same. Where the front is, a little bit out of focus. Then on the inside of the chassis, we're probably looking at the same, nearly 10 mil. And on the front of the wheel, it's the same. Then underneath, plenty of clearance for that caliper up in the chassis. We've got a good bit of distance between the brake line and the tyre there. And you can see well, you wouldn't have seen them, my rubber bump stops that I've put in there. We've got about 25 mil travel until we bump out. But when it hits those rubber bump stops, it's not so bad. But yeah, you can sort of just see all the clearances and what we're dealing with. All right, I'm gonna roll it out, detail it, and let's get some photos of it. Alrighty, wheels and tyres are on. It looks mad. It looks real good. Let's have a good look at it. Just completely changed the look of it. I'm real happy with it. It just, yeah, it's just taken it to another level. Sensational. Just the dish on the back. Super aggressive. Beadlocks. Yeah, so good. All the brakes painted up nice. Let's just tuck in a good bit of rim. Brakes look good in there too, nice and clean. Yeah, real happy. Got the windows tinted as well. And there you have it, guys. You can see why I'm so excited about these wheels on the tonner. It does look exceptionally well. I don't know if I'm just biased, but yeah, for me, unreal. Not very many tonners like this that look like that, so I'm real stoked. Next episode, I'm off to Rocky Nats in a couple of days. So I'm going to do all that when we get back. I'm not sure whether I'm going to upgrade the fuel system so we can get that more power out of it, or I'm going to play around with perhaps some two-step and trans brake with the gearbox. Haven't decided yet, so you'll have to keep an eye out for that. But yeah, something like that down the lines as we continue to get ready to do some roll racing and some drag racing as the weather cools down this winter. That in itself is exciting as well. I really look forward to that. Far out, I've nearly done everything I ever thought I'd do to this car, so I'll put a little link here to a playlist I put together on the channel. I can't remember, I think it's 26 or 25 episodes since it was a V6, like standard ute, all the way to what it is now. I've pretty much documented every single thing I've ever done to it. So if you're interested in this sort of thing and you want to go right back, it'll spin you out. Like the first shed that I started in working on this car in comparison to what I'm dealing with now, I think myself pretty lucky, and I'm super stoked to have this as my car. It's pretty cool. So yeah, you know the normal stuff. Subscribe, like, comment, share. Share's good. Get some more subscribers would be good. And yeah, check out the other videos and keep a lookout, and I'll see you on the next one.